There is no doubt that the outbreak of COVID-19 has profoundly changed the world from being a health crisis, which has claimed the lives of more than 2.3 million persons globally. The economic damages caused by the virus has been unprecedented for Lagos State, despite the disruption of economic activities occasioned by the lockdown last year. In a bid to control the spread of the virus, the state government has remained focused on its promise to transform the city. Thus, as economies around the world begin to implement recovery strategies from the shockwaves of the virus, the Lagos Economic Summit Group is charting the path for the sustainable socio-economic development of the state at the Lagos Economic Summit tagged Enyigbeti 2021, scheduled to hold from February 16th to 18th, 2021. Enyigbeti, which is a private sector-led participatory forum, has been the driving force of infrastructural and social economic development in Lagos State since the year 2000. The three-day summit, which will be a hybrid of virtual and live events, is expected to draw participation from different sectors of the economy and across the globe. Now, to give more insights into the strategic agenda of the 2021 edition of the Enyigbeti, as well as highlight its economic benefits, I have joining me now via Skype, Chief Executive Officer of Economic Associates, Dr. Ayo Teriba. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Teriba.
Thank you very much.
Yes, first, I'll say the Lagos Economic Summit Group has returned with Enyigbeti to continue public-private sector dialogue in Lagos State. What do you think about this step at this time that Lagos is increasingly becoming an economically significant city in the world?
Oh, well, it's a continuation of a journey that, began more than 20 years ago in 1999. And it was a good thing that the then newly elected democratic regime found it necessary to engage the private sector to be able to aggregate views on how best to take Lagos forward in socioeconomic terms and in infrastructural terms. So this is a journey of more than 2 decades, and it's heartwarming that another edition is here. The benefit of the event over the first 2 decades are there for everyone to see, and it would be nice that the dialogue be made an ongoing process, particularly try to make it happen every year.
Described as a socioeconomic and infrastructural planning tool from where Lagos was in 1999, would you say private sector-led participatory forum has really contributed to the development of the Center of Excellence?
I don't think you should describe it as private sector-led or public sector-led.
Okay.
It's an engagement between the private and the public sector. It's important. It's a very important visioning process in which the private sector and the public sector come to a consensus on what's best to achieve for Lagos. And each side will play their roles, in ensuring that that happens. So it's a public-private engagement rather than a private sector-led engagement.
Okay, that sounds good. So it's both sides coming together to chart a new course for the Center of Excellence. But now you've touched on this, but what would you think really prompted Enyigbeti? And why was it necessary at that time? And even now that we are grappling from COVID-19 fallout and, of course, the NSAS protest that was hijacked in Lagos.
Well, it's not difficult to see the reason why Enyigbeti, an engagement forum like Enyigbeti is very important. Recall that before the return to democratic rule in 1999, this state and the country had been under military rule. And it's not difficult or it's not impossible for the military regimes to be out of touch with the people they are governing. After all, it's a command situation, you have no choice but to obey what the military orders that are dished out. So it was apt that when the democratic regime took over, the saddle, that they agreed to this initiative of a regular engagement with the private sector, so not to be out of touch, with the aspirations of the people that they have been elected to govern. So that's something that every state should, practice, should try and institute. And I understand that it was this engagement that gave birth to the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning in the Lagos State government. You can, imagine the kind of strides that the state would have achieved through the activities of that new ministry, new as of 1999, of Budget and Economic Planning, that it's been in existence now for more than 20 years old. And you've seen a string of, very highly talented commissioners lead the ministry over those period of more than 2 decades. So I do think that it was a good thing that they started the engagement then. It's a good thing that they've sustained it up to now. It's also a good thing that they've managed to institutionalize some of the modalities within the government by creating the ministry, as we said, and by creating the Lagos Economic Summit Group, that also steers the proceedings. It's very obvious, that it was something that was important to do. So we should be, encouraging that this, be continued, and that other states should emulate the initiative. Placing, balanced emphasis on the infrastructure and the socio-economic side of things. Infrastructure is about, places, while the socio-economic component should ideally be about people.
Dr. Teriba, I totally agree with you that this is a public-private dialogue, public-private sector dialogue. But I'm also looking at why the private sector really agreed to key in. Is it just because of Lagos, or what do you see? And if we look at all of the consensus being built, where do you see Lagos in the next decade? It's a 2-in-1 question, Doctor.
Oh, well, you already, in one of your questions, mentioned COVID, the challenge from the global pandemic. But it's not just the challenge from the global pandemic. The pandemic is primarily a humanitarian challenge. It's about health of the populace. It's about morbidity and mortality. How many people become sick, or how many people, lose their paid ultimate price, lose their lives because of the pandemic. That's the primary challenge of the pandemic. We've seen the first wave, and that abated. We are seeing the second wave, and I believe the second wave is also abating now. So there is that challenge that government and private sector have to work together to improve our pandemic preparedness. But the pandemic is not limited just to the health challenges. It also has ripple effects. The lockdown, cripples economic activity significantly as to impose another recession, not just domestically, but globally. So you are looking at the world economy that is in a recession, you are looking at the national economy that is in a recession, in addition to the human costs, that the primary problem of the pandemic brought. So you don't need to persuade any of the two sides, whether the public sector or the private sector, on the need to work together, not just to face a common enemy, but also to prepare to confront the post-pandemic challenges, because once the pandemic goes, maybe because of increased vaccination, you then have to rebuild the economic ruins, the damage that the pandemic has done to livelihoods. You can't assume that all the businesses that were locked down will reopen on their own. Some will go into liquidation. Many jobs that have been lost will not automatically be restored. So public sector and private sector has to work together to ensure that the challenges coming from the global, situation, coming from the aftermath of the pandemic, or even the future risk of any other pandemic, that they work together to ensure they minimize the losses in the face of the pandemic, and that they build the resilience, going forward, to ensure that recovery after the pandemic is accelerated, and that the ruins are rebuilt, and needed adaptations are made to ensure that Lagos continue to be the leading city or the leading state had been prior to the pandemic.
Well said. Dr. Teriba, let's take a break and we'll be back, and this discussion will continue. Stay with us. This is Business Nigeria.
It's time for Eyigbeti, the private sector-led Lagos Economic Summit. This year's edition is a virtual event for business leaders, academics, techies, and entrepreneurs to set an implementable agenda for a greater Lagos. From the 16th to 18th of February 2021, participants from all over the world will converge to discuss transformational initiatives that will advance the development of Lagos State at the Eyigbeti Online Summit. At the forefront of this summit is the private sector, leading discussions that will provide government with a roadmap for Lagos till 2050. For more than 20 years, Eyigbeti has contributed significantly to infrastructural and policy development in Lagos State. Join the conversation today. Contribute your quota. Register for the conference at www.eyigbetisummit.com. Let's come together for a greater Lagos. Eyigbeti is hosted by the Lagos Economic Summit Group and powered by Stanbic IBTC Pensions, STB Building Society, United Bank for Africa, Providus Bank, Vetiva Capital Management, Leadway Assurance, Premium Pension, Trust Fund Pension, and Ford Foundation.
Yes, we are still talking Eyigbeti 2021, and I have Chief Executive Officer of Economic Associates, Dr. Ayo Teriba, who's been talking to us via Skype. A lot of issues surrounding this Lagos Economic Summit. Now, this edition of Eyigbeti has listed some notable African leaders. We have the likes of Mo Ibrahim, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Dr. Adesina, in addition to an array of private sector leaders that will set an agenda for the Lagos State government for the next decade at this edition of Eyigbeti. Now, does this signal Lagos State's awareness of its place as a global city and commitment to operating at the level?
Of course. I mean, the answer to your question is quite obvious, but Lagos is a global city. That awareness is not limited, to Lagosians, whether in the private sector or in the public sector. It's something that is becoming common knowledge, even to people outside of Lagos, or people outside of Nigeria, or people outside of Africa. So the world looks up to Lagos as a major city in Africa. The rest of Nigeria looks up to Lagos. So it's important for Lagosians, both in private sector and in government, to try and rise up and live up to the lofty expectations that the world imposes on them. Lagos needs to regain its place as perhaps the leading city in Africa, and needs to consolidate its place as the leading city in Nigeria. And we need to speak more. We've achieved a lot on the infrastructure front and on the socio-economic front, on the people front over the past 2 decades, but there is more to achieve. to ensure that the places in Lagos are more attractive, are better connected, and more productive, and that the people in Lagos are appropriately equipped to take the best advantage of the resources that nature has bestowed them with. Lagos is the leading coastal city in the country, with a lot of the attractions that come with being coastal. The ports, the beaches, and then the borders, of Lagos. Lagos is quite endowed. All roads in Nigeria leads to Lagos. So Lagos needs to provide example to the rest of Nigeria on how to update infrastructure, to world class, and how to maintain world class type of infrastructure. We've made progress, but there is yet, more to achieve, particularly to boost the efficiency in which people can come into or go out of Lagos or move around in Lagos, particularly, towards getting to the ports and coming out of the ports. So it's a lot of challenge, and you cannot trying to bring leading African figures to the event. Also, would ensure that everybody participating at such events, contribute, their best, and the resolutions at the event are likely to attract wider attention. You are likely to mobilize more energies around working to realize the resolutions.
Dr. Teriba, let's talk about projects you see around Lagos that you say came out of Betty. And do you also think that states need to replicate this very beautiful model like you've identified and, make us understand it?
Well, perhaps it's true to say that since 1999, the state of Lagos had made the most interventions on its physical infrastructure, particularly the roads or the bridges or the underpasses, that the government has, invested on. Quite a number of roads have been dualized. Quite a number of new bridges have been built that makes for better connectivity, the different parts of Lagos. You remember the nightmare that passing through Oshodi used to be, and that, intervention has helped. I cannot begin to list all the various roads, or even the Lekki, Epe Expressway. There are numerous, too numerous for me to begin to count in this. And there is more that is planned, Fourth Mainland Bridge and the rest of it. So I do believe that Lagos had made very commendable progress. The physical infrastructure has been upgraded to levels much higher than was the situation prior to 1999. But there is yet more to do, and it's important that the current, generation of, private sector leaders in Lagos take the baton over from those that started it 2 decades ago or more than 2 decades ago, and ensure that more is achieved going forward than has been achieved, in the past. The BRT buses, the terminals, the rail lines, the blue line and the red line, the water transport, improved road networks and bridges, etc., are some of the achievements over the past 2 decades. And you probably will have a longer list of the things that still need to be achieved over the next decade or two, all to make Lagos more productive. But it's important to emphasize that as you make these interventions on the physical assets of Lagos, or as you invest on place-based projects, we should place the people-based interventions on the same level of priority. Yes, a lot has been done to take some migrants out of the streets, but more still has to be done to make sure that we maximize the human capital of Lagos with the same vigor that we are trying to maximize benefits from the physical capital of Lagos. The theme of the summit is already twofold: socioeconomic on the one side and infrastructure on the other. I'm just saying that a lot has been achieved. There is a lot more evidence of what we have achieved on the physical infrastructure front. We should try and aggregate, record more successes, or an equal amount of successes on what we're achieving, on the human, capital side of things. Try and make sure that the kind of, action that we saw in the aftermath of the NSAS protests, where some people sprang to the streets and began to destroy the physical infrastructure, which reminds you of the Yoruba adage that says that it's the child that you do not build that will destroy the house that you build tomorrow. So let's be balanced. Let's reduce the chances that we have, such large numbers of people who are only too happy to just spring onto the streets and destroy the things that others have spent decades trying to build. I do think my point is clear, that we should place the two objectives on equal levels of priority. Physical infrastructure is important, but human capital development is no less important, and that going forward in Betty, seek to bring evidence that progress is being made on the two tracks, at the same pace.
Okay, let's wrap up this way. Do you think other states need to take a cue from this, right? Like replicating the same kind of summits in their states? And are there other thoughts or perspectives you'd like to share with us on Betty as we wrap up this segment of the discussion?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity for that parting shot. I not only think that other states need to do this, I actually think that all states should institute this, and the country itself should institute engagement on how to develop physical and human capital, and create institutions that we see to the implementation, just like the Lagos State government has created the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, and you have their private sector, in the private sector, they've created the Lagos Economic Summit Group. It's important that even cities, or, the cities that are big enough, we are big enough to have a city hall, it's important that the state and non-state actors, create forums for shared vision, for visioning and for sharing the vision and for working together, particularly given the challenges that we have, coming from the global environment, which is, raising challenges for the management of the country, or for the revenue that the states can expect to get from the center. You cannot overemphasize the need to develop your physical capital and your human capital, which are the two inputs into your economy. Your economy is about products. What do you produce? How much of it do you produce? But you need to engage your physical capital and your human capital to produce in the economy. The stronger your human capital progress, the stronger your physical capital progress, the larger your economy. And of course, the fourth wheel is the governance process, the leadership. So it's good that you have a government in Lagos that is willing to seek out the view of the private sector and run with it. And it's also good that Lagosians on the private side of the divide are dressing up to the challenge. We should congratulate them for what they've achieved, past 2 decades and wish them well in the years to come, and hope that other states and the federal government would emulate them, and cities that are big enough would also emulate the initiative. And we wish them all the best in their deliberations in the forthcoming summit. I think on that note, I would say thank you very much.
All right, thank you so very much there, Chief Executive Officer of Economic Associates, Dr. Ayo Teriba. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us on Business Nigeria and discussing this very important topic. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.